Welcome to Music from Home, a series of videos created by Yakima Symphony Orchestra members. My name is Sara Mayo, and I am the Principal Trombonist of the Yakima Symphony, and today we're going to be talking about the Trombone Family. I figured I'd start with the most basic example. This is a tenor trombone. Most trombonists started on an instrument like this one. This is what's known as a straight tenor, and we call it that because it has no valve. It's also commonly referred to as a jazz tenor, and so I will use this horn when I am playing jazz or I need something else that has the sound of a smaller instrument. This is also a tenor trombone. This is what is known as a symphonic tenor. This is my daily driver. This is the trombone I spend the most quality time with. And the major differences between this horn and the straight tenor are that it's a little bit bigger. You can see both the size of the bell and also the circumference of the tubing. That allows me to get a bigger and broader sound, which is useful for times when I have to, for example, overpower an entire orchestra. The other major difference is this valve, which is called an F attachment. It adds extra length to the instrument, which extends my low range. Now, if you look down at the other end of the trombone section, sitting next to the tuba, you will see a trombone that looks slightly different than this one. It's going to be bigger, it's going to have a bigger bell, and it's going to have two valves instead of one. This is the bass trombone, and those two valves allow it to play even lower into the range of the tuba. The bass trombone acts as a bridge between the trombones and the tuba because the two instruments have very different sound characteristics, or what we would refer to as timbre. The tuba is what is called a conical instrument, which means that the tubing gradually increases in size from the mouthpiece to the bell. This gives it sort of a darker, more mellow sound with a little less edge. In contrast, the trombone has more cylindrical tubing, which means that the tubing stays the same circumference for a larger portion of the instrument. This is most obvious if you're looking at the slide, for example. And what that does is it gives us a brighter sound, and it means that as we get loud, we have a lot more edge and sizzle, which is a source of angst for a lot of conductors. So basically what the bass trombone does is it adds a little extra edge to the tuba sound, which unifies the sound of the low brass section. I have one more instrument here to show you, and it is a prime example why you should always hang your trombone to dry instead of putting it in the dryer. This is the alto trombone. It is smaller, it is pitched in a higher key, and it gives me a lighter and more compact sound. If the orchestra is playing music from the time of Mozart or Beethoven, you will probably see me playing this, and it has to do with the history of the trombone in the orchestra. The trombone is one of the oldest instruments, but it actually joined the orchestra relatively late. Before it joined the orchestra, it was frequently played in the church and was considered by many to be a sacred instrument, which may be a surprise to anyone who happens to be friends with a trombonist. Our job was to double the choir, and so we had an alto, a tenor, and a bass. Beethoven is widely credited for introducing the trombone to the orchestra when he put us in his Fifth Symphony, and the section he used was also an alto, a tenor, and a bass, and so this became the orchestral trombone section for a long time. We were basically our own sort of self-contained section, and then meanwhile, the horns and the trumpets were off doing their own thing, which was mostly pitched percussion because they did not have valves yet, and so they were limited in the number of notes they could play. If you look at music from this time period, they are frequently used to double the timpani. The trombones were a distinct advantage because the slide gives us an easy way to change the length of the instrument. We have to work a little harder, but we've had the full assortment of notes since the beginning. Once valves were invented and they had more notes, composers started writing for us as sort of the brass section as a whole, with the trombone sort of holding down the low end. And this is why we're referred to as the low brass, and it's also why the alto trombone was gradually phased out in favor of two tenors and a bass. Eventually, the tuba was invented. They became our greatest ally, and it was pretty much over for the orchestra after that. So there are other types of trombones out there. There is a soprano trombone, which is also called a slide trumpet. It's usually played by trumpet players, although I'm pretty sure our bass trombonist owns one. I think he might just about own one of everything. At the other end of the spectrum, there's also a contrabass trombone, which looks like a bass trombone on steroids, and is either played with a handle attached to the slide to reach all the positions, or with sort of a double-wrapped slide. If you want to see all the trombones in action, search YouTube for Moravian Trombone Choir, because they will traditionally use from the soprano trombone all the way to the bass, sometimes with a contrabass thrown in for color. There's also a valve trombone. That's out of my jurisdiction. Thank you for joining me today for a quick and only somewhat simplified history of the trombone, and hopefully I will see you all again soon.